In a land where the past and present intertwine, there lived a woman with a gift so powerful it could bind the threads of her ancestors and the future in one stroke of her loom. But in her village, no one knew just how deep that power ran until one fateful day. This is the story of Fatouma, a Kente weaver whose hands held the power of ancient magic and whose destiny was tied to the survival of her people's heritage. But first, let me ask you, what would you do if the very heart of your culture, your history, your soul was about to be lost? Would you fight to save it, even if it meant tapping into powers beyond your understanding? Fatuma, though born in Nigeria, had roots deep in the traditions of Ghana. Her hands moved with the rhythm of generations, weaving together stories, prayers, and hopes in every thread of Kente cloth. The village had always respected her for her skill, but recently they had forgotten. The noise of the modern world was louder than the soft hum of her loom. People rushed past her shop without a glance. The old ways, they said, were fading. It broke her heart, but Fatuma was not just any weaver. She carried a secret, a magical power passed down through her bloodline, one that she had never dared to use until now. The villagers no longer cared about the time and effort it took to create kente cloth by hand. Fatuma's shop was almost forgotten, a relic of a time that seemed to slip away faster with each passing day. The young people, especially, wanted nothing to do with weaving. They laughed at the idea of learning a dying skill, preferring quick money and fast trends. That evening, Fatuma sat with her closest friend, an elder named Amina, in her shop. Everything's changing, Amina. No one cares about Kante anymore. The younger generation, they've lost their way. Fatuma sighed, her hands resting on the half-finished cloth before her. Amina, old but wise, smiled softly. Do you remember what your mother told you before she passed? That there was a way to make them see. Fatuma stiffened. She had always known what Amina was referring to, the magic. But magic was dangerous, unpredictable. Her mother had warned her never to use it unless there was no other way. But as the days passed, the shop grew quieter. Fatuma's savings dwindled, and one day she sat in her empty shop facing the truth. If she did nothing, the Kanti tradition, her legacy, would die. Fatuma knew what she had to do. She placed her hands on the fabric and whispered an incantation in her mother's tongue, a language almost forgotten. She felt the power rise, slow at first, like the distant rumble of thunder. Her hands glowed as the threads of the cloth began to shimmer. But magic came with a price. Fatuma's vision blurred, her head spun, and suddenly she could hear voices, voices of the past, the ancestors. They whispered to her, guiding her hands. She wove through the night, never stopping, never resting. When the sun rose, her shop was filled with kente cloths, more beautiful than any she had ever made before. But they were more than just beautiful. Each cloth pulsed with energy. It was magic. The next day, something strange happened in the village. People began to feel a pull, a magnetic force drawing them toward Fatuma's shop. It started with a few, but soon the entire village, young and old, rich and poor, found themselves standing at the entrance of her shop. They couldn't explain why they were there. It was as if the cloth itself was calling to them. Fatuma stood at the loom, calm and composed, though her heart raced. She hadn't known the magic would work so well, so fast. The villagers stared at the kente cloths in awe, unable to resist touching them. And when they did, something even stranger happened. Each person who touched the cloths felt a surge of emotion, memories they hadn't known they'd forgotten. They saw their ancestors, the voices of their grandmothers telling stories of old, felt the pride of their heritage rushing back. The young, who had scoffed at the idea of tradition, found themselves crying, overwhelmed by the beauty and significance of what they had almost lost. The cloth had awakened something in them, something deep, something they didn't even know they needed. After the crowd disperses, the village chief, a respected elder named Obina, approaches Fatouma. "You've done something extraordinary," he said, his voice low but cautious. "But magic is not to be trifled with. What have you done?" Fatouma lowered her eyes. "I did what I had to. The people had forgotten who they are, where they come from. I had no other choice." Obina frowned. "Magic always has consequences, Fatouma. Always. Be careful. Power like that, it demands balance." Fatouma knew he was right, but for now the village had remembered, and that was all that mattered. Days pass, and word of Fatouma's magical cloths spreads beyond the village. Soon people from other towns come to see the weaver with the enchanted hands. At first it was a blessing. Fatouma's shop flourished. The young apprentices she had once struggled to teach now begged to learn from her. The village too grew prosperous as travelers came from far and wide, bringing trade and wealth. But with the growing attention came envy. There were those who didn't understand the magic, who whispered that Fatouma was a witch, using dark powers to control the village. And then strange things began to happen. One night a fire broke out near her shop. No one was hurt, but the villagers began to wonder, was it a sign? Was the magic turning against them? Fatouma stands alone in her shop. The weight of what she had done presses on her. Had she made a mistake? Had she brought something into the world that she couldn't control? She could feel the magic still coursing through her, but now it felt different, more intense, more dangerous. She knew the power wasn't just hers, it belonged to the ancestors, and they were watching. One day, a rival shopkeeper named Chidi, fueled by jealousy and fear, confronts Fatouma, accusing her of sorcery. Soon tensions rise. The villagers gather, uncertain whether to defend Fatouma or condemn her. And then Fatouma does something no one expects. She steps forward, holding one of the magical Kente cloths in her hands. "If you think this is dark magic," she says, her voice steady, "then let it show you the truth." She holds the cloth up to the crowd, and the air grows still. The cloth shimmers, and for a moment everyone sees the same vision. The village as it was hundreds of years ago, vibrant and full of life. Its people proud of their heritage, their culture strong and unbroken. The crowd gasps. The rival shopkeeper drops to his knees, and Fatouma knows this is only the beginning. The air was thick with tension, and Fatouma could feel the eyes of the village upon her. Some looked at her with awe, others with fear. The rival shopkeeper, still on his knees, lifted his gaze, his voice trembling. "Fatouma," he whispered, I I didn't know. I didn't understand. Forgive me." But the village was not so easily swayed. From the back of the crowd a voice called out. It was Chief Obina, his face solemn. "You've shown us the past, Fatouma. You've reminded us of who we are. But what about the future? Can you promise us that this magic will not destroy what we have left? Can you control it?" Fatouma stood tall, though inside she was uncertain. The magic had a will of its own. She had felt that from the beginning, but she also knew that without it, the legacy of her people, the traditions of the Kente cloth, would fade into nothingness. I can't promise what the magic will do, she said softly, her voice carrying over the hushed crowd. But I can promise this: I will protect our heritage. I will teach those who wish to learn, so that even if the magic fades, the craft remains. There was a murmur of agreement from the younger villagers, the ones who had touched the magical cloth and felt its power deep in their bones. One of the young apprentices, Kofi, stepped forward. Fatuma's right. We've forgotten where we came from, but we don't have to lose it forever. We can learn. We can make the future brighter with the wisdom of the past. Obina nodded slowly, though his eyes were still filled with caution. The magic is strong, Fatuma. But remember, magic has two sides. Be sure the power does not consume you. Fatuma swallowed hard, knowing the chief's words were true. She looked at the cloth in her hands, the shimmering patterns now flickering softly like a dying flame. She had called upon the ancestors for help, but now it was time to let the magic rest. The real work, preserving the craft, needed to be done by human hands, not supernatural forces. With a deep breath, she made her decision. Over the next few weeks, Fatuma began teaching the craft of Kante, weaving to anyone who wished to learn. The magic, though still present in the cloths she had already made, began to fade. Fatuma no longer used the incantations of her ancestors, instead focusing on passing down the skill itself, stitch by stitch, thread by thread. And something beautiful happened. The young people, once uninterested in the old ways, found themselves captivated by the art of weaving. Kofi, now her most dedicated apprentice, showed real talent, and soon the village became known for its masterful kente cloths, not because of magic, but because of hard work, dedication, and the stories woven into each piece. The rival shopkeeper, humbled by what he had seen, even began to sell Fatuma's cloths in his store, offering a portion of his profits to help preserve the craft. But the magic wasn't gone. Fatuma kept one cloth for herself, the first one she had woven with the ancestral magic. It hung in the corner of her shop, glowing faintly, a reminder of the power she had tapped into and the responsibility that came with it. Sometimes late at night, when the village was asleep, she would hear the whispers of the ancestors, not words, but a soft hum, like the sound of her loom in motion. It reminded her that though the magic was no longer needed, it would always be there, watching over her, guiding her hands. Years passed, and the village flourished. Fatuma's shop became the heart of the community, a place where tradition and modernity met. People from far and wide came to see the famous Kente weaver, not because of magic, but because of the beauty and significance of the cloths she and her apprentices created. One day, as Fatuma sat weaving, a young girl entered the shop. She was no more than 8, her eyes wide with wonder as she stared at the vibrant fabrics hanging from the walls. "Can you teach me?" the girl asked, her voice small but eager. Fatuma smiled warmly, her heart swelling with pride. "Of course," she said. "Come sit by me. I'll show you how it's done." As the girl took her place beside the loom, Fatuma glanced at the magical kente cloth hanging in the corner. It shimmered faintly, a reminder of the journey she had taken. But now The future was in her hands and in the hands of those who would come after her. And so Fatouma's journey came full circle. From a weaver struggling to preserve her heritage, she became the heartbeat of her village, a symbol of resilience, creativity, and the unbreakable bond between past and future. Her story reminds us that even in the face of great change, the traditions that shape us can never truly fade as long as we are willing to fight for them. What did you think of Fatouma's journey? Do you believe in the power of tradition and heritage? Or do you think the modern world has moved too far away from these ancient customs? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories that celebrate the beauty and power of African culture. Thanks for joining us on this journey, and we'll see you next time.